everyone is here for you. The room is full of people who love you. The cake has your name on it. Someone is giving a toast about how much you mean to them, and you are standing right in the middle of it, feeling almost nothing. Or worse, feeling like an outsider quietly watching a party happen to someone who happens to share your face. It should feel like being fully seen. Instead, it feels like being watched from a strange distance, as though the celebration is happening to a version of you that everyone else can see clearly and that you, somehow, cannot quite locate yourself inside of. Carl Jung had a real explanation for why the moment specifically designed to celebrate you can produce exactly this unsettling distance. Jung believed that the persona, the version of a person that gets presented to and received by the world, is never fully identical to the deeper private self that actually experiences life from the inside. In ordinary moments, this gap between the presented self and the private self usually stays comfortably invisible, since no one is asking either version of you to step fully into the spotlight at the same time. A celebration specifically built around you does something different. It puts the persona, the version everyone actually came to honor, directly and completely under the light, while the quieter, more private self stands somewhere just behind it, watching the whole thing unfold. And if the gap between these two versions of you has grown wide enough, that private self can feel genuinely locked out of a moment that is, on paper, entirely about them. This explains why the feeling so often shows up specifically at exactly the moments meant to feel the most personal and the most affirming, since these are the precise moments when the persona is receiving the most direct, concentrated attention, while the deeper self, standing just behind it, has had the least practice being invited into the spotlight itself. The love in the room is real, the toasts are sincere. What feels distant is not the affection being offered, it is the specific version of you currently receiving it, which may not be the version that actually feels most true from the inside. This offers something genuinely worth sitting with rather than something to feel ashamed of. If you regularly feel this particular distance during moments that are supposed to feel personal and affirming, it is worth asking honestly whether the persona receiving all this attention has become over time considerably more polished and considerably more practiced than the private self underneath it, which may have had far fewer genuine opportunities to be seen, celebrated, or simply witnessed directly as it actually is, rather than as the more curated version everyone else has come to expect. Here is what actually helps, and it is smaller and more practical than it might sound. During the actual moment of celebration, rather than continuing to watch it happen from that strange, distant vantage point, try deliberately grounding yourself in one specific, real sensory detail, the actual warmth of a hand on your shoulder, the actual sound of a particular person's laugh, one genuine specific moment of real connection rather than the whole overwhelming general spectacle of being celebrated. This small shift often pulls the private self back into direct contact with the moment, even if only briefly, rather than leaving it standing entirely on the outside looking in at its own party. There is a second, longer-term practice worth building if this distance shows up repeatedly across many different celebrations and milestones. It helps to deliberately create smaller, quieter moments in ordinary life where the private self, rather than the practice persona, gets genuine direct attention, an honest conversation with one trusted person, a quiet acknowledgement of something real rather than impressive, slowly giving that private self more practice being seen so that the big, bright public moments eventually stop feeling like something happening to a stranger, reading your name. Think honestly about the last celebration held specifically for you and consider whether the distance you felt was really about the people in the room or about the gap between the polished version of you they came to honor and the quieter, more private self standing just behind it. Right below the single word for what you wish someone in that room had actually seen in you, beyond the version everyone came to celebrate. Naming it honestly is the real and practical first step toward finally closing the gap between the self who gets celebrated and the self who actually gets to feel it. Because feeling like a stranger at your own celebration was never, according to Carl Jung's understanding, evidence that the love in the room was not real. It was evidence of a gap between your presented self and your private self, one that can genuinely narrow over time, once the private self starts getting some of the direct attention it has been quietly missing.